I'm joined by Neville Obahedo. He's a lecturer at the Department of Political Science here at the University of Benin, making him a political scientist. Apparently, Neville, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, viewers at home.
We appreciate it. So let's talk about not just politics, but certain issues that had been highlighted in some excerpts that we've seen from the book, My Participations, written by former governor of Osun State, now a leader of the APC, Chief Bisi Akonde. A lot of persons have said that book, on the one hand, is a reminder of how that most times when Nigerian politicians, especially those at that level of being the elite politicians, write books, they are always self-obsessed and self-glorifying. While I don't want us to dwell on that, I want us to look at some of these highlights. For example, he has talked about where we were in the 80s when President Muhammadu Buhari, then General Muhammadu Buhari, became head of state, for instance. And then he drove the narrative all the way down to the present time, especially talking about the circumstances that led to the emergence, or if you like, the choice of Muhammadu Buhari as president or presidential candidate at that point in time. How much of the Nigerian story as it stands today, whether it's social, economic, or political, does this book tell?
Well, the point of departure in assessing the book, My Participations, by Chief Bisi Akonde, we have to commence with just a panoramic summary of the life, public life of Chief Bisi Akonde.
Of the author himself?
Yes. I remember that Chief Bisi Akonde was a wartime deputy governor of Old Oyo State. He was a one-time secretary to the government of Old Oyo State. Later, he became the governor of Osun State, that was carved out of Oyo State. Later, he became the pioneer national chairman of APC. Talking about his participation in politics and his experience with Muhammadu Buhari, before we now talk about the book and what it represents in the political space of Nigeria today. I remember that Chief Bisi Akonde was one of those that was accused of corruption, and he was put on trial and sentenced to 44 years imprisonment. He was in prison at Agodi before the government of Babangida came to set many political prisoners free. Now, Chief Bisi Akonde, the book that is writing about his participation in politics, is a book that favors him and his political ambition, the political ambition of the group that he represents. When I say his political ambition and the political ambition of the group that he represents, he is a known die-hard follower of Chief Ahmed Bola Tinubu, who is not no longer news that is gunning for the office of president based on what he has described as a Jetomali agreement between him and Buhari in 2015. Now, in times like this, we expect elders, because by January 16 next year, this man will be 83 years. So this is somebody that is like my mother's age mate. I know what my mother used to tell us and the grandchildren, great-grandchildren right now, because she feels that on a daily basis she's getting closer to where she came from. And so in times like this, we expected somebody like Chief Bisi Akonde, an elder statesman, to call a spade a spade. When I say call a spade, if you want to talk about Buhari in his military government days, he should say exactly what Buhari did that was right, what he did that was wrong. Then we now come and now situate Buhari in the present Nigeria political dispensation. He failed to do that. Instead, he was calling names of people. I don't want to go into that aspect. But talking about Nigeria right now, one is expecting my participation to talk about his regret. For example, about the failure of President Muhammadu Buhari, former head of state, former GOC 3rd Armored Division of the Nigerian Army, who quelled the Matasini religious riots in the north, who fought the Cameroonian Jedams in the mid-80s. For him to be president and commander-in-chief right now, his home state is ravaged by bandits and criminals and terrorists. Ditto for other states of the country. For somebody to write a book and gather the creme de la creme of Nigeria for the launch of the book, and yet he will not say the truth, speak truth to power, because he doesn't have anything to fear. He has already lived his life. He's waiting for God to call him. So if you look at the book critically, the book does not touch aspects of Nigeria that Nigerians want to hear, about security, about health, about economy, about how Nigeria is now divided along ethnic lines because of the way the government of Nigeria is trying to sentimentally support groups that are terrorizing the country.
I want us to, now that you mentioned the groups terrorizing the country, I want us to use that as a basis to talk about insecurity. As we speak right now, there have been a series of protests up in the north. They are now trending the hashtags Secure North, North is boiling, and so on and so forth. All right? Some say North is bleeding. The question is this not a kind of, if you like, a litmus test for us as a country and as a government? Because you're wondering, at a point it was only Borno, later it became all of the three major states in the northeast. Today it has essentially moved to the northwest, including the president's home states, all right, of Katsina. A lot of persons say the wealth of experience that President Muhammadu Buhari brings from his military days should be enough, for example, to drive the heat against these criminal and extreme elements that we have up in the north, for example. There are also those now saying that, hold on a second, this thing is more protracted than you realize. It has been called several names, guerrilla warfare, and so on and so forth. How much of excuses do we need to push further?
Number one, I don't want to agree that it is the north that is bleeding alone. Nigeria is bleeding. I will come to the reason why the north is bleeding. And the northern people, the northern elite, should find solution to the problem of the north. And the southern elite should find a solution to the problem of the south. Let all the elites of Nigeria find solution to the problem of Nigeria from their own basis. Now, let's take the issue of Edo State. Edo State is one of the states in the south. You cannot travel from here to Lagos without fear of losing your life. You cannot travel from here to Okada without fear of losing your life. You cannot travel from here through Naifo Road to Akure without afraid of being attacked by kidnappers and armed robbers, as the case may be. You cannot travel from here to Auchi or from here to Delta. There's no way, even through waterways. There's insecurity everywhere, and people die. Kidnappers will kidnap people. If you are not able to pay that sum of time, the person is killed. If they are heading the people into the forest, they are not able to move. From experiences from people who are able to come back, they will say, if you are not able to move, they will just shoot the person, either push inside the water or push the person by the roadside. Nigeria as a country is bleeding. Now, talking about the north that is bleeding, the other day I saw that young people across Nigeria, across southern part of the country and north central, they were talking about anti-SARS protests, end-SARS, and so on. And I saw young people from the north, some part of the north, they came outside to say that they are supporting SARS. And then when the government was now coming up with a plan to assuage the problem of anti-SARS, they were now talking about making it a nationwide thing. Whereas some were supportive of it and some were against it. Now, that is the sentiment and the tribal or ethnic aspect of Nigeria politics that is destroying this country. Why I say that the north is not bleeding? Because it is the northern elite that is responsible for the bleeding of the north. I will give you an instance. There are some states in the north that have boundary with neighboring countries. There are some states in the north that have boundary with the Benin Republic, some that have boundary with Niger, some that have boundary with Chad, and some that have boundary with Cameroon. Now, because according to them, the boundary is artificial. It's like somebody wanted to cross from Ovioge to Ekeadolo, and there's a boundary between Ovioge and Ekeadolo. Ovioge is on Nigeria part, Ekeadolo is on Nigerian or Chadian part, and then they intermarry. On the map, Ovioge is Nigeria. On the map, Ekeadolo is Niger. Now, criminals from Ekeadolo, from Niger, for instance, will enter Oyoge. Because they have relatives in Oyoge, they will allow them. So these are ungoverned spaces where criminals come into Nigeria and they are known by the leaders of the communities that are in the border areas. Then from there they smuggle arms into the country and they are known. And the security agencies in all those areas, they compromise for fear of their own life. They try to dance to the whims and caprices of the leaders of those communities. And the leaders of those communities, they are close to politicians. And so when you hear that the north is bleeding, the people responsible for the bleeding north, the government knows them, the federal government knows them, ministers know them, the presidency knows them. Why are they failing to tackle the problem of Nigeria? I will give you an instance. When we are talking about insecurity as it relates to the north in particular and Nigeria in general, on election day, let's say you are from Akoko, for example, I don't know where you are from, maybe you are from Sasaro, or you are from Ipechi, or you are from Auchi, you are in Ibuta area. Every community in Nigeria is garrisoned with soldiers, police, armed to the teeth across the country. Okay, if we are saying that from here to Auchi now, we have Eke Azolo Forest Reserve, we have Eho Forest Reserve, and then we have Zeba Forest Reserve. Inside this forest, there are criminals, armed robbers, and kidnappers. And yet, 1/4 of the soldiers and policemen that are deployed to Edo State on election, they are not deployed to that forest to get rid of the criminals. Then something is wrong somewhere.
So our priorities are misplaced.
Yes. So nobody. I feel that there's a political economy aspect of security or securitization of Nigeria and the Nigeria political space. Otherwise, all these things that we are saying, we have problem of insecurity, blah 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 blah. We are the cause of the problem of insecurity, and unless we tackle it, the problem will remain, and many people are smiling to the bank and they are benefiting from this insecurity problem. One
of the issues that Chief Bisi Akonde, on account of this book, has also highlighted is the fact that President Buhari was, quote unquote, the one who applied for the job of being the president. So he says, rather than complain, go ahead and fix the problem. Isn't that enough work that you should expect from a man of that? I mean, for him to have the courage to speak up at that point, that was speaking truth to power on some level, wasn't it?
It was not speaking truth to power, because I will explain. When you say somebody is speaking truth to power, as the president was there that day, he was supposed to have led the book that he has written. I have written a book. I have deified you. I have beatified you. I have glorified you. I have demonized those who did not want you to come to power in 2015. But Mr. President, in this area from 2015 till now, you have failed. Mr. President, from 2015 till now, in this area you have failed. He failed to do that. Even looking away from the book. Now, when we are talking of President Buhari coming, it was a gang up against the government of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan that brought Buhari to power.
Isn't politics always about ganging up?
Yes, politics is about ganging up. And so those that are big gang up against now should not now worry.
Okay.
Because they have done that to people. Now, the gang up against Jonathan, people who robbed Jonathan of presidency, for example, the second tenure, they now want to come back and be president of Nigeria. The chicken must normally come home to roost. So let's look at that one. Then we now talk about Buhari wanting to be president. If Buhari wants to be president and he is not president, and you play the role, your political machine play the role in the election of the president, and the president is not performing, why can't you tell the president to perform? Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna State wrote a letter to the president some time ago about the direction of his government and how he need to recapture the government from those who were not part of the installation of the government. Now, what stops Chief Bisi Akonde from writing to the president to say, Mr. President, even though I'm a member of APC, even though I was there when you were elected as a president, you have failed in this area, you have failed this area, you have failed in this area, and it's a shame or a vote of no confidence on our party. He failed to do that. Now, Mr. President, as at the time they were launching that book, the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, he threw in the towel by writing a letter of resignation to the president of the country, that because he could not, his government could not guarantee security of lives and property in Burkina Faso as a result of Islamic insurgency and terrorists that was even targeting military formation, killing them and carrying their weapons. He was throwing in the towel. He has resigned. Now, I expected Chief Bisi Akonde to also advise the president to sit up and perform the function of the office of president by ensuring that those who are responsible for the insecurity and insurgency in the country, they are brought to book, and by ensuring that those who are found those who have confessed to the fact that yes, they are the people sponsoring or responsible for the criminal, they are guillotined by the state. You don't need to carry them and make them to go and be facing trial. You say you want to respect the rule of law. A man has told you, I'm the one responsible for planting bomb, for killing people. You need any other court, any special court, to now say that this man was admitted to put on trial, and then after putting the person on trial for some time, you now come back again to say this person has repented, let's release him back to the society, let him go and join the police, or let him go and join the army, and then you say you are fighting corruption. No one, I tell you the truth, no one is fighting corruption is fighting insecurity in this country as we speak.
Let's talk about insecurity in particular now. Former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo this week has said that it will be foolhardy, or if you like, waste of time, to use his words in particular, to expect President Muhammadu Buhari to perform any more than he has already done. But let's create a bit of context quickly. Recall that in 2015, former President Obasanjo had also, in a way, marketed then candidates Muhammadu Buhari on the platform of the APC to Nigerians. As a matter of fact, at the point, he told Nigerians that this man will not steal your money. This man will deliver the best of democracy, dividends of democracy to you, and so on and so forth. Then, fast forward into a few years, into the first term of the former President Obasanjo starts writing letters, some of them open letters, to the president as he stands today. And some have said jokingly that former President Olusegun Obasanjo is the only former president who has written the most letters to a sitting president. And today he says, look, don't expect anything more. This man has given you the best that he can afford. Help us create context for that.
Well, when I read about Obasanjo and some of the things that he writes or says, I used to laugh. But sometimes, quite frankly, I used to reason along the line of Obasanjo reasoning. Now let's take the issue of marketing Buhari in 2015 and demarketing Buhari in 2021. Now it's like a man sees a beautiful woman, maybe in a bus, in an airplane, in a school environment, in the marketplace, in an office,
or maybe on Facebook.
Yes, on Facebook. Very beautiful woman.
Yes.
You say, I would like to marry this woman. Then you get close to the woman, and at the end of the day, the woman, in the course of trying to actually marry you because they has also seen some stars in you, will now pretend, hide her character. And then the woman is lying in your house. The love that you have for that woman before, the love cannot die. Because even if the woman is beautiful, she has a certificate. There is more to marriage and marital relationship than beauty and certificate. That morality, if it's not there, the mutual respect, if it is not there, you give her respect, you provide for her, you are there for her, you communicate with her, you make her happy, and she's not there to reciprocate because she's having other people maybe that influenced her before you got married to her that she's still relating with, without you knowing, and she's always looking unhappy, not ready to give you the percentage of what you are giving, or more than that. The love that you have for the person will gradually die. And then you can now begin to look away from that woman with her beauty and her certificate, and even her family background if she's from a rich home, and be looking for somebody, maybe a housemaid or any other person. It's the same thing that is happening now. Right now, so I was part of those who marketed Buhari.
In 2015, I guess.
Yes. How did I market him? There are some certain platforms that I belong to, where people were saying the man hates Christians, the man Buhari does not like Satana. And I said, let me go back to Buhari's administration. And I went to Buhari administration, and I saw that when Buhari was head of state in between 1984 January to August 1985, that there were 20 governors that he appointed. Out of the 20 governors, because one of the governors of Old Cross River State, Navy Captain Edet Achibong, was removed. He was said to have involved himself in corruption while he was still in the flagship. So they removed him and put Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Patrick Achibong as the governor. So instead of 19, there were now 20 governors that he appointed during that period. And I tried to take a look at them. In the old Bendel State that we are part of, Jeremiah Hussaini from Plateau State was the governor. Yeah. Then Plateau State, Samuel Atukum that was governor. River State, Fidelis Oyakhilome was governor. These are Christians. Then Oyo State was Oluloyo. Ogun State was Oladipo Diya. The list is long. Then when you now look at the minister that he appointed, he appointed Dr. Professor Ibrahim Kampari, who is now chief of staff, as minister for external affairs. He appointed Chike Ofodile as a minister for Attorney General and Minister for Justice. The list is long. People that he appointed, Christians were more than Muslims. So when people were talking about this man is anti-Christian, I said, let us look at the military governors that he appointed. Christians were more. The minister that he appointed, Christians were more. So I don't believe that the man was a fanatical Muslim. Let's give him opportunity. And because of the way he tried to himself, and today, dear God, that he was his deputy, the way they tried to handle Nigeria in terms of war against the discipline, that we should give him opportunity. It's like that beautiful girl that I was just talking about. And now, we now see that the man is no longer performing, or the woman is not alive to the responsibility upon which you marry the woman. The next is to demarcate the woman, or demarcate the president, President Muhammad Buhari in this case, and look for a credible alternative that will put an end to insecurity and ensure that the Nigerian economy is not dependent on importation. Even though the president and the government is trying in the area of the economy, and I know that there's an impact of COVID-19 and the rest of them on the economy of Nigeria, but the basis for the economic growth of any country is the security of the state. Right. If the security is not secure, if the territorial space of a nation state is not secure, no person, both domestic and international investors, would like to come and invest in such a country. And it is this investment that can lay the foundation for the economic growth of a country. This is what is missing.
I want also use this book to look at the history of, if you like, book writing, as we have seen by politicians, whether they dropped uniform from, whether they were from the military and then came into mainstream politics, or they were persons who have spent the most of their lives within the political space, for example. How come when we read these books, we don't see much of that intellectual disposition as to the state of the economy, for example, as to things we have been able to accomplish in the areas of, say, health, which is very critical, infrastructure, for example, education in particular. We don't see all of those. What could be the reason? Could it be because of the intellectual demand it places? Or is it just a matter of, let's take the easy way out and, adopt the line of least resistance?
You see, there's what we call, it's just like the Yorubas will say, Enigbo Jaye, that is somebody that understands life, enjoys life.
Okay.
So, if you want to be a writer, you have to develop the art, A-R-T, of writing. Now, if you are in a position of authority and you are not a writer, you can only commission somebody to write for you. Okay. You just write your CV. And
the person transcribes for you?
Yes, you just write your CV. You just put some important points there. So I occupy this position. These were the people who influenced me negatively or positively. Just give the person. So write for me.
Then he goes to expand it.
Yes. Then after that, you just say, I've done a very good work. The work is neat. Okay, go on. The intellectual input from that person that they are writing about, or that is writing in quote, is not there. And that is how the book will go to the press. I've seen such books. But that is by the way. People, just like a man becomes president, he will appoint a speechwriter. As we are talking here on television now, the president will not have opportunity of sitting down with his speechwriter to say, my speechwriter, this is what I have to do for the people. This is what I will not do for the people. Use this thing to write a speech for me. I want to go and deliver a speech. Tomorrow or next tomorrow, at so place. This is what I have in mind that I will want to tell the people. It is not like that in government. What is the government that maybe there's a PA to the president or governor? They will bring a paper. The president is going to address a group of people at so place. They will just call the speechwriter. The president will not see the speechwriter. We say, Mr. Speechwriter, Mr. President is going to deliver a speech in Addis Ababa, and he's going to be talking about crisis in Sudan. So go and write it, go and develop it. And when you finish developing it, you are not taking it to the president to discuss it with the president. You still give it to the PA. The PA will look at it, and then we now say, okay, it's good to go. Or maybe they will take it to the chief of staff. Chief of staff will say, good to go. Mr. President may just see that speech for the first time in Addis Ababa, and he just be reading it. So what the president is reading there is not what he is having in mind concerning Sudan. And He does not believe in what he's saying because he did not make any input to that.
So he can't commit to it.
Yes, that is how it is at the presidential level, governorship level, local government level. All those National Assembly people, House of Assembly, when they want to go and deliver, they just call somebody, deliver, write a speech for me. This is what I want to go and deliver. You go and deliver it. The intellectual touch, the ambition and the vision of the person and the mission that's supposed to be contained in that write-up will be missing. So this is the problem that our society is facing. It's not like America president. If it's go to Egypt to go and deliver a speech at the Egyptian War College, military war college, before he leaves America to that place, he already knows about Arab-American relations, military, political, and otherwise. So he will just need one or two things from the speechwriter to support what he already has in his brain. By the time he gets there, he will deliver a speech, not just deliver a speech that will attract applause from the people. He will actually deliver a speech that is reading the minds of those that are controlling the institutions of America in terms of America-Arab relation or America-Egypt relation. This is missing. If it is missing here, and people are writing books, they are just writing books about what they had in mind, but it's not what they actually put down, but what their writers or their friends who write put down for them. And this is why you have gaps in such write-up, just as you have a lot of gaps right now in the book that was written by Chief B.C. Akande.
Irrespective of those gaps that you talk about right now, how much lessons can we glean from this book for whatever it's worth? And going forward, what components should we have in books like this in the future? Because it will appear that there's a bit of narrow-mindedness that comes into book writing by political elites in this country. That narrative has got to change in the near future, doesn't it?
The other day I was reading a judgment of the Supreme Court, and one of the things I was reading in that judgment was the style of writing by judges. And when we talk about the style of writing by judges, and I had to now remember the man they used to call the Socrates of Nigeria judiciary, Justice Chukwudifu Oputa. When the man writes, even if you are not a lawyer, when you read about the man, you read about his judgment, any judgment that the man delivered, you must take a biro and paper to judge something, to learn from, even if you are not in any way connected to law, to the law profession. There is also one judge now, a judge of the Court of Appeal. They call Justice Festus Ogbunya. When the man writes a judgment and you read it, you will love law and you will love writing. Now, there is what we call the art of writing. You need to learn it. That's the reason why if you go to school, you go to university to pursue masters or the graduate or even postgraduate degree, PhD, the postgraduate school will normally bring a guideline for writing your project, writing your thesis or dissertation. It will guide everybody in the school that is writing PhD or masters across the school, so that anything you want to write, you must write within the confines of that outline.
So there's a template already?
Yes. That is how it is done all over the world. Now, if you now want to write, there must be people that have the art of writing you are going to consult. I want to write. Give me a draft of what, this is the title of what I want to write, my participations. Just help me to break it down. These are the things I have in mind. The person will help you to arrange it. Then, in the context of that arrangement, you are able to bring up a book that will cover the gaps that we'll be talking about. And others, younger generation, will find the book readable and they will find the book useful and they will derive lessons from such books. So right now, as we are talking about the book, My Participation by Chief B.C. Akande, what are we supposed to learn from it? What we are supposed to learn from it is this: that one, in your lifetime, you should document your journey, your political journey, your academic journey, your marital journey, your professional journey. Document it
by way of memoirs.
Yes, so that your children, your friends, and other users may find it useful and learn from it. Number two, that if you believe in a school of thought, you so much believe in a school of thought, you continue to strive to remain as a member of that school of thought. And when the school of thought is derailing, you cannot be a leftist within the school of thought by drawing attention that this school of thought that I belong to, that I'm ready, I've sworn to die for the school of thought. I want a situation where this school of thought will amend its ways so that people that want to belong to this school of thought can belong to it. I will give you an instance. In 1989 in China, because of the impact of democracy across the world, students in China wanted democracy in China. They came outside and they protested for several days on the streets of Beijing. The government of Deng Xiaoping warned the students to leave the street. That the act of coming out to protest against the communist government was treason. It was punishable by death. Because of their strong belief in democratic values, the students did not leave the street. They were there. Tiananmen Square. The government, the Chinese government, rolled out armored tanks. As we are appearing on this television program, that was how they were showing them live. They used armored tanks to crush the protesting students. Even though that was a kamikaze, as the Japanese would describe it. But it sends a message to people in China that this communist government will not tolerate this kind of indiscipline and an affront on the state and what it represents. There was a man in that government, a prime minister in that government of China. His name Zhao Ziyang. Zhao Ziyang, in the meeting of the Communist Party, vehemently opposed the Communist Party and the government for guillotining those people who were protesting against the government. And that cost him his job. Number one, as prime minister, and number two, as future president of China. The lesson we have to learn from the write-up of Chief Bisi Akande in this contest is that if you belong to a school of thought like Zhao Ziyang belonged to the communist school of thought, and you see that there's something wrong with the way and manner that your political machine is presiding over the affairs of the country, the context of Buhari just now and the government of Nigeria, you should muster the courage, especially as an old man, to come out and say, Mr. President and our political machine, we have not helped matters. We are destroying this country. Let us recapture this country and put the country on a developmental pedestal. Chief Bisi Akande in his book failed to do so.
Incidentally, it turns out this is the much time we're allowed to talk about this morning, but Neville Obakedo, thank you, as usual, for coming to share insights this morning with us. We're leaving here this morning, everyone. We're back shortly to have a handful of interviews, and then the program will come to an end. Stay with me.